Hi friends, and welcome back to A Bridge by Alpal. As you can see, we have our first ever guest on the channel. This is my lovely friend Zeb Marchbanks, who has been working on a book for the last 22 years. Just to throw you under the bus a little.
Not consecutively. Not consecutively.
Not 22 years straight. Finally finished your first draft for it.
Yes.
About a month and a half, 2 months ago?
About in April, mid-April.
Okay, and that's felt really good for you.
Yes, it's nice to actually get something finished. I've heard the idiom many times, something finished can be fixed.
Yes, the panel that I went to that inspired me to do the channel was like, if you've done 80% of the job, you can move on and then come back and fix it later.
Yeah.
And what you need to do is like have something done first and then you can worry about the details. But if it's never done, then you're never gonna have anything of substance.
100%. And it's also been interesting having so many ideas in my head for so long and seeing them come to fruition.
Yeah.
And also seeing them come to fruition in a way that I hadn't necessarily expected. Some of the differences in how it turns out in the actual narrative versus how I had envisioned it in my head. And being something that I am in charge of creating has been kind of wild to see that.
Yeah, it's been really cool. So we'll talk a little bit about the journey of this, right?
I probably started writing when I was 8.
Oh, yeah.
In 3rd grade.
This book?
No.
Okay. No. I was like, holy crap.
No, just in general. It was a lot of short stories. It was, the idea of a novel when you're that young feels insurmountable. Yeah, that's an audacious process.
Sorry, there's more than like picture books?
It was a creative outlet. I had always been creative growing up, just playing in the backyard and things like that, and imagination games. As I got into, junior high and high schooling and classes became more formal, it was a little bit more interesting to me, the rules, the concept of crafting a narrative, things of that nature. And so I wrote the first draft of my first novel between roughly 1997 and 2001. And that was a science fiction novel. And like looking back at it, there's a lot I learned from that as far as like world building, character development, things of that nature, or more notably the absence of it in that novel.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something a little bit more substantial, something that had sort of a philosophical edge to it, something that had some existentialism to it. So that's when I started Plane Jumpers. Although it wasn't that at the time, it started as an Elder Scrolls fan fiction.
Honestly, some of the best books start out as fan fiction.
Yeah.
So like that.
So I started it in 2004. I did it as a fan fiction for maybe a year where I went through multiple revisions and iterations of not even the entirety of Act 1. I found that restrictive. There were things that I wanted to do where I didn't want to mess with the canon of like the authors of the game and their story. I didn't want to be limited by some of their magical systems or their political space and things like that. So I shifted it into more the story that I have today with the characters I have today and the names. I worked on it for a couple of years, probably from like 2004 to 2007, but again, constant rewrites, constant striving for perfection in those early chapters. I would get halfway through Act 1 and then start over and never really got beyond that.
Yeah.
And then I think in 2007, like I changed jobs, I got married, I went through some fairly major life changes, and it just sort of kind of fell off my radar a little bit. I am not entirely certain what prompted me to get back into it in 2014.
Well, it's because the year ended in a 4.
Yeah, the year ended in a 4th. There's definitely, you will notice a theme there. Like it had always been in the back of my mind. It was not anything that I ever stopped thinking about, but it was something that I stopped actively working on. I picked it up, I started working on it. I got really far, but then I ran into some motivational issues. I think I got inside my own head about like, what is the state of books and novels and reading in an increasingly attention span centric social media world and things like that. I had some difficulty getting feedback from readers and stuff, and I think I fell into a little bit of a demotivational trap that looking back, perhaps I shouldn't have, but that sort of happened at the time.
Yeah.
2004, you came along. Or 2024, you came along.
And that's my part of the story.
This is your part of the story.
Yeah. Zeb and I don't work together, we're coworkers, and one day at lunch, I don't even know, was it like, did Simon already know you? Was that it?
Simon is the one that began evangelizing this to people.
Yeah, started talking about how much I love reading books, and you just go, oh, I wrote something once. In the back of my head, I'm thinking like, you read something and you're like, okay, like it's good. And you want to encourage the person to keep going. You told me the title of it and it was Plane Jumpers. I believe I've told you this before. I thought it was like an action thriller about people who like to jump out of planes. Right? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, that's definitely not my kind of genre, but also like above everything else, I think that I am just like a super loyal, like, you know, let's do it kind of friend. And so I was like, yeah, I'll read this book.
This book I'm definitely going to hate.
I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's like no chance I ever finish this, right? And so then you send it to me and I like open it up and this first scene, this isn't like too much of a spoiler, they're playing football at like some park. Okay, you know, this is going where I think it's going, and then all of a sudden it was not going.
It was not, it shifts pretty quick.
And then I realized it was fantasy and I was like, oh, and like things started clicking. And so I read, I think you had what, the first half of Act 1 at that point? Or
no,
was it
I
all
think
of Act 1?
it was probably all of Act 1. It was the first 145 pages and it ended in the middle of chapter 11.
Literally the cliffhanger.
Literal cliffhanger.
Yes, I remember that. I remember you like warning me and being like, it's a little cliffhanger. And I'm like, it'll be fine. And then I got there and I was like,
yeah.
You gotta finish this thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a very persistent person, right? So
Yes.
over the last 1.5 years, just been constantly bullying you and saying like,
bullying with love.
with love, but still bullying. Absolutely still bullying. And just being like, when am I getting my next words? It was like every Monday you'd finally send it and I'd just all caps, words, I get words today.
Yeah, which we joke about the bullying, but I found that exceptionally motivating.
Good, I'm glad. I'm glad it wasn't like detrimental.
No, it was very good. I know that there's a lot of people that say like, write what you know, write for yourself. And I think those are true. And I think you still should. I don't think you should write for someone else or write your writing in an effort to cater to a particular audience. You still should do your own thing. But the idea that you have an audience out there that wants to hear what you have to say, is interested in your plot or your characters and wants to know what is going to happen to them and is invested is an experience that I wasn't ready for.
Yeah.
It was
I mean,
very,
if
very
you
nice.
were gonna find any two people to like be
Yeah.
gung ho and supportive, it was probably me and Simon.
Yeah, you know, I talked about motivation issues before, and for good or for bad, that's clearly a trigger point for me. And so I do appreciate the enthusiasm with which you gently requested additional content.
Right.
Yeah.
Super gentle. It was fun for me. I feel like I've never really quite had the creative brain to do something like writing a book. And so it was my way of figuring out what that world is like, right? And obviously, in no way, shape, or form is it like my book. I got to have a hand in this and I got to help push it over the finish line.
Oh, 100%.
Which is the closest I'll ever get to writing a book. So that's pretty sick for me.
Perhaps. I will say, taking on a novel, I had written mostly short stories prior to this, and the idea of taking on a novel is very daunting. It's a much larger endeavor. I'm kind of a narrative snob, so I'm very concerned about continuity, about character consistency. There's that little voice inside you that says, can I keep all this straight? Can I make a character grow and make it feel, natural? Can I get people invested without tugging on heartstrings in a way that's sort of obviously contrived? There was a large portion of me that wasn't sure I would be able to do that. You said having a hand in shaping the book. I was writing a female character for the first time, and that is a very sort of scary proposition as a male author wanting to...
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the top things you can get canceled for, I feel like, as a male author. Writing bad female characters.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and even beyond getting canceled, I think I just want to do justice to the gender, right? My mom instilled in me a lot of belief in strong female characters, right? We grew up watching Sarah Connor in Terminator and Ellen Ripley in Aliens. I think there's something to be said about writing a female character with a certain accurate feminine strength, also speaking to a female experience in a way that is effective and relatable to some extent. And I do think that particularly on some of, Adela's more major plot lines, you were kind enough to let me sort of give you some spoilers and talk through some of the ideas I had, and a lot of your reaction to that, the validation that you gave me, I think gave me the courage to kind of go forward and really make it like a try at it.
And maybe one day we'll get a second female character.
That is planned in book 2.
You talked about it, the fact that I don't like spoilers, right? And as you're going through this, even though it was very slow, usually it doesn't take me a year and a half to finish a book because I gobbled them up. I was still invested enough in that character to be like, okay, for this one particular instance, I'm willing to take spoilers just to make sure that we're doing her justice. Quite the journey that I had with Adela too, because I did not like her at first.
No, not many people do.
But then, by the end of the book, Adela is probably my top character.
Okay, that's...
Maybe second.
And especially with a character who has such a mysterious past, who is so kind of emotionally closed off from people, to be able to write something like that with limited screen time, limited interaction, and still be able to garner that kind of emotional response from a reader is like extremely gratifying to me as an author.
Her response to someone coming to her and like just caring about her, right? And she was like, people don't do this, you know, like what do you want to get out of this interaction? Like, why are you doing this? And Marty's just kind of like, just wanted to check on you, you know, like, don't come for me. I was just trying to be a good person.
Right.
And as someone who is the Marty in that and has dealt with the Adelas, and they're like, well, okay, what do you want from me because of this? And I'm just like, no, like I genuinely just like, I want to be there for you. That scene was actually one of my favorite scenes of like just trying to drive that message into people's heads. I'm not going to say everyone's just nice to be nice.
Right.
But there's certainly like people out there, and like, you know, a good number of people who are just nice because they want to be nice.
Yeah, I do agree with you that it is probably more of a rarity. At least for
I guess it's hard for me because I'm just over here and I'm just like, why would you not be nice to someone? That would be so mean.
But you think of like just from a purely altruistic standpoint, I think that's a little bit more rare. And I think anyone that has read the YouTube comments on the internet would notice that people don't always go out of their way just to be kind and supportive.
Let's talk about some of the other characters. Okay. So the three main characters, you call them the main characters,
yeah,
right?
I would call them the
You've described them as like aspects of yourself.
Yes. I think everybody has this where you have different elements of your personality. You have the person that you take to work, the person that hangs out with your kids, the person that is with your spouse, close friends, family. I have noticed that I have, you know, these various aspects that I turn on and off depending on what situations I'm in. So I think Martin is the version of myself that can be decisive, that can move forward with something. The guy that eventually does finish his book. Also the kind of the peacemaker, wanting everyone to get along, wanting to make sure that like no one's left out and that everyone is taken care of. I think Josh is the version of me that can get a little emotionally reckless, someone who something doesn't quite go right at work and you give a little rant about it, you know, or you get fired up about situations in the world and, you know, stories that you hear about things that you deem as unfair. It gets you a little fired up and maybe you don't always know how to express that properly. And it comes out a little profanity filled.
Fiery. Maybe.
Yeah. And then Leo, I would say, is probably the more cautious and timid side. The aspect of me that doesn't want to move forward without having all the information because of how worried I am of making a mistake or how worried I am of adversely affecting someone else in a way that I didn't anticipate because I didn't feel like I had all the information. I tried to use those aspects of me as an effort to give my characters different voices, distinct characters. They are still three middle-aged guys from, you know,
the suburbs.
America. The suburbs of America. How distinct can they be? And so I kind of tried to lean in on some of the challenges that I've faced over the years to kind of exaggerate those in sort of literary way to make them a little bit more distinct and play with those kinds of things a little bit.
You brought up earlier, people say write what you know, and that is what you did, and yet you didn't write 3 self-inserts of Zeb, right? You wrote 3 different versions of Zeb that do probably exist in the real world somewhere else, not just like in your head.
Right.
And I think it was a job very well done.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
For those who know me well, there are a handful of dialogue moments that are very coded to my speech patterns that are very noticeable.
We've talked about Adela. She kind of starts off as like this character you don't really like, definitely a mystery.
Yeah, little prickly Pete.
You find out things about her and it doesn't immediately make you want to forgive her.
Correct.
Right? But then like as she continues to move and like you're seeing her actions through the slightly different light, you realize like, okay, like she's just trying the best that she can do, right?
Yeah.
And so she's not perfect, but she's also not the word that I called her the first time.
Yeah, I do think that Anther is a little bit of an analog to her. I mean, they're both characters from this new world that we end up in. He does also have some things in his past that perhaps he regrets. Some things that he did.
Some.
Yeah. A lot.
More than some.
It's a lot. I've dealt with some sort of tragedies in my childhood. I had a lot of friends who had divorced parents and saw like the different ways that they would handle sort of those negative experiences and how it manifested in their behavior. Anther definitely takes his approach to mitigating his guilt in a much different way than Adela does. Where she sort of separates herself from people as a protective distancing. Anther has a tendency to control people and manipulate them with information almost as a way to say, I've run into these pitfalls and I am going to prevent you from making the same mistakes I did whether you like it or not.
Gadela very much had the attitude of like, well, I'm going to hell anyway.
Yeah,
you know, and
very,
just like,
very much so.
it doesn't really matter what I do from this point on, because I already know that I've done the worst thing I could possibly do.
Yeah, she has kind of accepted her fate to some extent, and I think she believes she is undeserving of redemption.
There is religion, there is myth that's in this world, and as readers, we should never know what's true and what's not. But like, I was going to ask, in your head, like, is any part of this true?
Well, and especially as someone growing up in Utah as a non-religious person in the middle of, you know, this very religious sort of community, being an outsider on that, and also sort of exploring all of the other world religions from a perspective of not understanding faith very well, and seeing all the different possibilities and how fervently people believe that they are right about the thing they do, and the concepts of truth and relative truth versus absolute truth. I did kind of want to toy with those. So in my world, there are certain things that are true. There are certain things that individuals believe that are incorrect.
Yeah.
And I do sort of, in future books in the series, want to explore what might happen to someone if they find out that the thing that they have believed their whole life is...
Don't do that to her.
Why?
She's been through so much. No.
You know what? Some of the rest of us have had to go through deep-seated religious trauma. Why should she be an exception? There's that concept, it's always darkest before the dawn.
Yeah.
I think she may have to go through some harder things in order to come out the other side in a better way for the arc that I have planned for her.
Yeah, okay.
I have a tendency to approach the world from a very black and white perspective. It's maybe a failing, maybe a character flaw, but it is also just sort of part of who I am that I have struggled to rail against. And I do like the concept of a black hat in, you know, a novel or something like that, or, you know, these guys are the good guys. I like that Captain America is a good guy, you know. At the same time, I do recognize that that's not really how the world works, and maybe that's also not the most interesting. I'm actually fairly proud of myself for writing characters that I feel are not necessarily deeply evil or deeply and unimpeachably good, that have sort of these other sides to them in relation to not only a lot of the things that happen in book one, but also some of the plans that I have for the series. Some of the resolutions to these arcs will not necessarily sway to be super positive or super negative. I think they'll be sort of two sides of the same coin. So I think it will, to some extent, be open to interpretation. I think you can have a tragic ending that is joyful to some extent, right?
I didn't like that.
But I also think that you can have Pyrrhic victories where, like, we succeeded, but there was a cost. I think the ending of book one, I think, is a little open to interpretation as to whether or not the journey was a success or a failure.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. I would also like the end of the series as a whole to feel like that it is open to interpretation. If there are debates from readers who say this was a positive ending or a negative ending, I think I will achieve my goal. I still want to have it have a resolution. I want the story to feel resolved. I want the characters to feel like they have fulfilled their arcs, so that there's not something sort of open-ended that's left wanting. But I would like there to be at least a debate on what was necessary, what wasn't. Was this a success? Was this a failure? Who's the true winners here?
While we're talking about characters, I do want to talk a little bit more in depth about Anther.
Sure.
Anther.
Yeah.
Like, I want to say Gandalf kind of character, Dumbledore kind of character, where like he is a mystery, but you definitely want to like take him as an authority figure. But then like
he's not as nice as either of those characters.
Not nearly as nice as either of them. And then you also just like, I feel like you find out a lot faster that he's nowhere even close.
Yeah.
To knowing everything that's going on.
Right. I want to do something different. I don't want to copy an existing archetype.
Yeah.
But I think to some extent there is difficulty getting away from certain archetypal characters, especially when you're writing like a fantasy novel. You know, everyone kind of follows the Tolkien blueprint to some extent, even if a lot of what I wrote was specifically designed to rail against sort of Tolkien's world building and sort of his style. I wanted something smaller, a little bit more intimate, more character focused, and less focused on like the overall broader world. Right? But I knew there were going to be comparisons to Gandalf.
I'm pretty sure you made the
Alanon.
Comparison first.
Possibly. Well, it's been sitting in the back of my head a lot. He's a mysterious wizard that shows up to bring the heroes along on a journey. Like, that's a trope that has been done before. But I didn't want it to last that long. I think in Act 1, You see him as a fairly benevolent mentor, if not perhaps as chatty and forthcoming as he could be. But then as Act 2 deepens, and certainly into Act 3, you start to see maybe where those differences sort of pan out a little bit more, and how he is not necessarily what you think he is.
Yeah, definitely an interesting journey to go on with him, you know, and especially now that I'm going back and rereading it all the way through and meeting Anther for the first time, and like how much more complex my feelings are about him.
Yeah,
than
knowing
they were
what
the
you
first
know
time.
now.
Yeah, kind of bracing myself for some of the things that are going to come next. Whereas the first time I read it, you know, he shows up and they're like, should we trust this guy? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely, you should trust this guy. Like,
look how friendly and wise he is.
Well, and like, what other options do you have?
Fair,
you know?
very true.
Like,
they're a little limited in their scope of possibilities at that moment.
Going back and rereading it, and they're like, should we trust this guy? And I'm like, I don't know, man.
Yeah, right?
And I've read the entire first book, and I don't know, man.
I do like that there's a little bit of complexity there. I've definitely had readers who think that he's undeniably a positive force in the world, and I've had others who are concerned that he could be the main antagonist. And that uncertainty is very fulfilling to me, because I like those debates, those discussions, and I like that there is evidence in the book that supports different arguments from different readers, that they're getting different things out of it, and that those pieces of evidence not only support their argument but do not contradict the arguments of someone on the other side. That I was able to write something that has that level of complexity was something I had always strived for and hoped for, but wasn't certain that I necessarily had the chops to do it. So
you don't want to go down the Game of Thrones route, right? Where as soon as anyone predicts what you're going to do, you have to change your plan, right? Because you want there to be enough people getting it right that it feels plausible, but then also enough people getting it wrong that like no one felt like they were on rock solid ground.
And in talking to some readers and listening to their theories, I like the idea that you will get some things right, because then you feel like, oh, I'm paying attention and the story isn't cheating me. It's telling me something, is leading me down a path, and that comes to fruition. So there's a certain level at which I can trust the author. But I also like the idea of having a couple of twists where you're like, oh, I didn't see that coming, maybe I should have. But it's still fun to have a couple of those twists in the road. I tried to be careful, and especially as we went through this process, you know, with like a little mini community of readers, that I didn't allow people to kind of sway me in a particular way, that I didn't cater to somebody's particular feelings, but did still integrate some of the feedback that came out of it while still staying true to the story that I wanted to tell.
Let's talk about the feedback process a little bit. There was me and there was Simon, and then Liz. Who were other like main contributors?
Taylor. Michael recently finished it and gave me some incredible feedback. Emily gave me a lot of feedback. Tanner. Carol was a big feedback reader of mine. Also, very interestingly enough, so she's from China originally, and her father, who still lives in China, also read it.
No way, I didn't know that. That's so cool.
I have international appeal.
Wow, look at you.
Those are the main like powerhouse ones.
When we all first started reading, you had a good chunk of the book done. What was feedback like for that?
It was interesting because the meat and potatoes of it happens after what you read in the first 11 chapters. All 5 of the main characters have been introduced. There has been enough world building that I think you kind of anchor where you are in the setting and the plot. Getting feedback where people were interested in knowing what happens next, were curious enough about the characters to want to know more about them, whether it's the mysterious characters from this world in Adela and Anther, or if it's some of the changes that are occurring with the characters from Earth and wanting to see where that goes. I felt like I had planted enough seeds that there was fruit to be born on that tree, and hearing interest from people about characters that I had written was incredibly motivating to like push me to like actually finish it. I had written some outlines, and I certainly had the entire story in my head all the way through. Getting it out onto paper is a little bit different of a task. Hearing that feedback and that interest really sparked me forward.
What about then pivoting that into when you started giving us more like weekly, bi-weekly updates? Was that something that you felt like maybe fundamentally altered anything about your book, or was it more just kind of a keep yourself in check as you're going to make sure that you're hitting the points that you want to hit?
I think the book book was always there. And I've heard some jokes that say any writer that thinks they're good isn't a real writer. And I think that this artistry has a little bit of that sort of undercutting themselves. You have a tendency to compare yourself to some of your favorite authors or some of the greats, and you see how successful they've been or how well they've been able to craft characters or novels, and you think to yourself, well, am I in that league? And how dare I think that I'm in that league? A lot of it was getting the feedback and hearing the excitement about, well, I want to know what happens with this character. When people started generating fan theories about what was going to happen to characters was very exciting, because then I got very excited for the people who had a theory that was right, and to see them feel good that they had correctly identified what was going to happen. And I was equally excited about those who were wrong, who were going to get a little bit of a twist in there that were like, oh. Started off, my goal was to write 1,200 words every 2 weeks. And I didn't necessarily succeed at that as much as I would have liked to in those early stages of sort of getting back into writing. And I've always struggled with discipline a little bit. But I think as we were going and I started doing the math in my head of how long it would be before we got to some of these scenes that I was excited about and that I could tell my readers were excited about. And I feel like it just built momentum like a snowball. Like the more I was able to do it and the more feedback I got, the more excited I was for that dopamine hit of like getting it done and getting it in front of something. There's always that thought, you write something and you're like, I don't know if this is any good. And there were certainly offerings that I had done where I was like, I'm worried that this is maybe a slower part. It's not as interesting, or that it just didn't land the way that I wanted to or that I had envisioned it. And then to get positive feedback about it, or to get criticisms, constructive criticisms in places I didn't anticipate, kind of makes you reevaluate. You're like, I don't know that I can trust my own self-evaluation of this, which means you can't trust yourself when you think it's bad. And that is strangely motivating as well. That made it a little bit easier for me to maybe take chances. And feeling in like a safe space with people who were going to be a little bit more honest with me was helpful. That engine just sort of like built on itself to the point where I was delivering over 1,200 words every week by the end of it.
I really super hope that it doesn't take you 2 decades to write the next one.
So do I. I am working on an outline right now. I have the first 8 chapters outlined in fairly robust detail.
Ooh, I'm excited. When do you think you're going to start picking it up again?
That's a good question. I would like to have the outline completely done before mid-July and start writing it again and start doing weekly offerings.
I'm excited.
Yeah. I also received a text from a friend that said, I kind of miss my little weekly updates with Anther and Martin and the crew.
Yeah. How has the break in between books been for you?
Difficult. Editing the first book has been hard. I don't really know what to do with it. I don't really know what my next steps toward publication are. This is the first one that I've done. I do know that there are still some narrative adjustments that I need to make, and there are obviously some spelling errors and some grammatical issues that I need to clean up. Doing it with being as close to it as I've been, and how much it has sort of lived in my head in the last 20 years, has made it hard, I think, for me to view it sort of objectively. And a lot of the advice I've gotten is to step away for at least a month in order to maybe gain a little bit of objectivity back, to be able to address some of those issues from a less emotional standpoint. I don't know if that's worked. This is something that has lived inside me for most of my life, and it's part of me. And so there is an element where I've missed the writing and I'm worried about losing that momentum, which is where...
Don't worry, Simon and I will be here forever.
You will absolutely be here. And so I want to get back into it to kind of retain what I've built over the last year and a half as far as discipline and consistency. There are a lot of things that plague sequels where maybe they're not as good as the first one, and I'm like, how much of the magic of the first one will I be able to recapture in this, especially as book 2 in a 4-part series? It could come across as filler a little bit, right? Am I advancing the characters properly? Am I advancing the plot in a way that is still engaging and interesting and doesn't just feel like a go-between? Also maintaining the continuity from the first to the second book and ensuring that I'm not missing things or accidentally retconning things in a way, while also planting seeds for future books toward my ultimate goal for the series. And that coupled with, I have finished a draft of the first book. It's important to celebrate those milestones, but I think it's also important not to let your foot off the gas too much, because that's just one lap of the race. We haven't hit the checkered flag yet. I think there's still a lot of research and a lot of discovery that I need to do into what the process is. And I think there's always that sort of daunting specter of failure, that maybe a traditional publisher isn't going to deem this as a publishable book right now. That doesn't mean it's dead forever, but that's still something that, someone that's as close to something like this sort of sits in the back of your head and gnaws at your brain a little bit. So
Talking about the objectivity and stuff like that, though, I feel like listening to you talk about it, it's just like you need a third party. You need an editor or a publisher.
Oh, 100%.
Or an agent.
There's a certain level of polish that I would like to kind of do on my own or with my friends, people who are sort of amateur editors, before I get it in front of a professional. But I think that's vanity more than anything.
Well, it's just making me think about the very beginning of our conversation where it was like sometimes having something done is better than having something perfect.
Yes.
Or striving for something perfect.
Yes.
You know, yeah.
That's a lesson that has taken me a long time to learn.
Yeah, you'll get there. It's okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the like more specific like feedback things that we gave you.
Yeah.
Because I feel like some of them, some of them were good, but also some of them were just like really funny. Were there other moments from anyone who was reading your book?
There are some fantastic powers and abilities that manifest throughout the book. I've definitely had some people who were very adamant that something was going to happen that was not, and having a conversation with them and trying to keep a straight face so as not to give away whether they're right or wrong is kind of fun. There were some heartfelt ones. I think there were a couple of times when people had indicated that a portion of the book made them cry. And that was very powerful to me in that I wanted to be cautious of overly sappy, sentimental stuff, but I did want there to be some genuine emotional responses. Tanner laughed when Leo manifests the cat and it meows.
The cat was so good.
Or some feedback where after a battle, the battle with the mountain folk, and Josh's curiosity around naming them, and Anther just dumbfounded, is like, I didn't name them.
It makes me think though of, there's two of us, two of your alpha, beta readers, whatever we are, that had very different tastes in what they like in a book, specifically me and Simon, because I don't like action. It's really hard for me to follow it, whereas Simon like eats that up.
Yes.
What other variety of point of views or like tastes did you feel like you were trying to keep in mind as you were writing?
Yeah, so it was one of those things where I don't think I realized the scope of tastes and reader flavors that there were that I was appealing to writing it. It was never sort of a conscious idea, because I think you're probably my sociology reader.
Okay.
My society reader.
Okay.
You tended to look at like the implications of how things connected to one another. I know that Tanner is an engineer, and some of like the blacksmithing scene, some of the technical stuff really appealed to him because that's kind of how his mind operates. Liz was the one who tagged relationships, emotional intelligence.
Just like
up on,
like really knew how to read the emotional pulse of the book.
To have some people from different cultures, and certainly a different culture as different as like East versus West, because I would say this is a very traditionally Western narrative, and to have someone from such a disparate culture to still find some of the human elements that are consistent amongst people and get some enjoyment out of there was something that I really felt good about, that it was able to kind of cross cultures. I wanted to write a fantasy novel, but I wanted to focus on characters. I wanted to have some sort of existentialist philosophy notes in there while still having it be like a fun adventure romp. And so I tried to do as much as I could to focus on characters. It is from limited third person, so there's only so much I can do with, the internal and emotional experiences of characters whose head we're not in at the moment. But I did try to focus on like their journey, their changes. The plot is sort of set dressing for that. Yeah. But also still does move a narrative along. Each offering or each chapter that came up, it was interesting to see that if it was a lull for one of my readers, the next one would be a high for them and maybe a lull for the previous one.
I feel like Simon and I did a lot of that flip-flopping.
Yeah, 100%. You guys are...
But you always knew you had someone, right? Yeah. Someone who's going to be excited about it.
You and Simon, I think, were very fun because you somehow bring almost the exact same energy to the table. Yes. But about very different things.
Yes. Same ice cream, different flavors, right?
Yeah.
It's something of like equal quantities, but different.
2 scoops of chocolate and 2 scoops of vanilla.
Yeah.
They're delicious.
Both of them great.
In different scenarios. You have different moods and different approaches. It was, again, gratifying to see so many different people have different stack ranks of characters, who they liked and who they didn't, different scenes that spoke to them, different interpretations of those scenes and what happened. I definitely wanted to make sure that I had planted enough evidence in the book that you could use that there were no fan theories that left the confines of the novel. Still,
there's a couple.
The scepters.
I'm still trying to figure out how the cloak works. I genuinely have no idea. I think I came up with like a decent idea last week, but I forgot to write it down. Yeah. I don't remember what it actually is, but it was like in rereading some of those early chapters where I was kind of like, Oh, I feel like maybe.
Something fun for me and maybe a little bit of a cop-out is that there are some mechanics that I, as the author, don't understand, that I'm still trying to figure out. I have sort of a directional point for it, but especially on something that I'm writing as a series, I think that's also maybe some advice that I would give is like, if you don't have all of it put together now, that's okay.
Yeah.
And there are some answers that you simply don't need. Star Trek got away with a warp bubble. They're like, oh, it was made this bubble, and now we break Einsteinian physics. And everyone was like, cool, Jordy. I think readers will have a tendency to allow you a certain amount of leeway on some of those things. And some of them could also be interesting. What is Anther's cloak? What are the mysteries behind it?
I don't know. I still really like my first theory, though. I feel like that's going to be one of the best ones.
Yeah. Stay in school, believe in your dreams.
I already didn't do that, so you're going to have to pick something else.
Yeah, that's more for your audience than you. Don't let yourself be what gets in the way of what you want to do. There are enough things that are going to get in your way. Don't be one of them.
No, that's a great point, because I feel like for most of my life I struggled with, like, if I asked for something in that moment, I no longer deserved it.
The mere audacity that you would have to ask for help or something immediately disqualifies you.
Just like basic like life experience things. Anything. The second I had to ask for anything, I no longer deserved it.
Yeah. There was a moment when we started this where Simon asked to read the book. I was hesitant because I had given it to people in the past who
didn't finish it.
Who didn't finish it or didn't read it at all. Who appeared very gung-ho, very excited. Oh, I would happily read this for you and give you some feedback. After enough times of that not happening, you kind of fall into the fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me paradigm. When I gave it to Simon on a Wednesday afternoon, and Thursday morning he came and he said, so about your book. And I said to him, I know, you didn't get to it, that's fine. And he said, no, I finished what you gave me. Very Simon. Which was new to me. That was such a catalyst. And then I think Simon knowing you and using you as the second one, because I think he knew you also did it very quickly.
No, I was going to say I was definitely slower than that.
Slower than that. Simon's a high bar. That's like saying I lost a one-on-one game to Michael Jordan. Like, no one's going to fault you for that. It was still in stark contrast to a bunch of people who hadn't read it or started reading it and stopped, which is also something that's very hard to like hear and not internalize. They're like, oh, they started reading it and it wasn't interesting enough for them to continue. And that kind of is a hard thing to get past. I don't think it's necessarily an indictment of your book as much as it is an expression of an individual's personal taste. In the moment, it's hard not to internalize. And again, just I think you just sort of your personality lends well to just excitement and joy and fun. And I think that helps.
Just be nice to be nice, and I don't understand anything else. If someone says, will you read my book? And I say, yes, I gotta read the book.
Good job, Marty.
And then it was really good.
Yeah, you asked me earlier about feedback, and I think feedback that you gave me was one of the major catalysts. Is you said, you told me this story, you said, I have read other people's stuff and it's what you expect from an amateur writer. And I was surprised by this, and when I read it, and you kind of paused as you thought, and then you went, it's a cut above. Yeah. And that was maybe one of the greatest compliments that I've ever gotten.
Well, I meant it.
Right, but especially from someone who reads a lot. There's a difference between an established, polished writer who's been doing it for decades, a la Brandon Sanderson, versus some guy at your work that has just been noodling on something in his spare time for 20 years, right? Like, I'm a little bit of an older generation. I'm in my 40s. I think that there's an element at which I really want to go a traditional publishing route. I think for that external validation, because anyone can self-publish, and I've definitely read some self-published pieces that were less good. There is that worry that if I self-publish, like, I'm caving to that. That's just probably me getting in my own head a little bit.
Well, and indie publishing also has the added benefit of no one else is dictating what's good enough to get published or not.
Yeah.
You know? And so like there's books that we can read now because someone decided to publish it on their own.
Right.
That we would have that publishers would have not thought anyone had an appetite for.
Well, and you do see success stories like Dungeon Crawler Carl is extremely popular right now and was self-published initially.
Yeah.
And then it gained enough popularity that publishers saw, oh, maybe there's a little bit of money to be made here, and now it's, kind of a phenomenon. The world is changing a lot and very, very quickly. And I think self-publishing is becoming more an avenue. So I don't want to dismiss that completely. I just want to, I want to take a crack at the traditional publishing, but I don't think that that's the end of the road necessarily.
Well, and you started writing this in 2004.
Yeah, it was a different world.
Yeah, and it's probably hard to let go of some of those lingering conceptions that you had when you started.
Oh, 100%, yeah. Well, and also not having any experience in like a traditional publishing space. All of my beta readers are still a tight-knit group of people that all of whom I know personally, with the exception of Carol's dad. Right? And so like I haven't like posted this on Reddit or Tumblr or Patreon or my soon to debut writing OnlyFans.
That's going to be a big hit.
It's going to be so big.
People are going to love
People
that
are going
one.
to be like, words? That's what I came here for.
Guilty. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was fun.
I know that you were nervous about it, but...
I'm still nervous about it. That hasn't gone away.
Well, I'm not anymore, so I had a great time.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk through this, because I do enjoy it.
Yeah, well, thanks for giving me content that I don't have to work for.
You're welcome.
I just got to sit there and edit it.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
100% free.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you guys enjoyed my chat with Zeb. Hopefully, we'll see your book published in like the next year or so. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. We can really only hope for the best, right?
Yeah, let's manifest it into the world.
Exactly. That's 100% the strategy that I've taken on most things that I do. I will talk to you guys again in 2 weeks. And again, thank you guys so much for watching. Bye.